What's in a question? Maybe just about everything important. A smart and sharp question should strike up a more engaging conversation. So Diane joins us in the studio to help us better understand the so-called Korean dream. Good morning, Diane.
Good morning. Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday, indeed. Tuesday doesn't get a lot of love, does it?
Not really.
Here's love.
Here's love Tuesdays.
All right, let's provide our question of the day once more for our listeners.
All right, so question, are you dreaming of the Korean dream?
That sounds so dreamy, eh?
Right. So it seems like the new American dream is the Korean dream these days. The American dream is a national ethos of the U.S., the set of ideals, including democracy, rights, liberty, opportunity, and equality.
And money.
And money, yes. And in which freedom includes the opportunity for prosperity and success.
Money.
Right. Money comes again. As well as upward social mobility for the family and children achieved through hard work in a society with few barriers.
So I didn't want to undermine that, but because the American dream also has been criticized for being very progress-centric, and that might not sound like a bad thing, right? I mean, fair game, you work hard, you play hard, you earn more, right?
Exactly.
But, you know, there seems to be repercussions of that too. The work-life balance destroyed, a competitive education system that pits kids together against each other at an early age and things like that.
Right.
However, that is still sort of a general goal if you come from a country that is living with lower GDP, for example, tougher conditions to send your kids to school, and things like that. And hence comes the Korean dream that is comparable, it seems, to the American dream.
Right. So compared to American dream, now the American dream, it's considered as a national ethos for South Korea to some foreigners.
Right. Exactly. So South Korea, the problem is, has been known as a homogenous nation.
Right.
The United States is built on this whole melting pot theory, right? There's less diversity in South Korea compared to countries in, namely, North America and Europe. So that comes with it, I think, its own set of complications. But more people are dreaming the Korean dream, so this discussion is worth it this morning. Is diversity, in fact, growing in South Korea?
Slowly, yes. The number of foreigners residing in Korea now exceeds 2 million, according to the Immigration and Foreign Policy Statistics monthly report of the Ministry of Justice. The number of foreigners residing in Korea exceeded 2 million for the first time in 2016, opening the age of 2 million foreigners in South Korea. After that, it remained at the 2 million level until 2020 and then slightly decreased to 1.9 million level in 2021, probably because of the pandemic.
Less people were immigrating to South Korea.
Exactly. In April, the number was still close to 2 million with about 1.99 million. This equates to about 4% of the country's total population, currently standing at around 51.6 million. And according to OECD's standard, if the number of foreigners exceeds 5% of the total population of a country, it's classified as multicultural and multiracial country.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Right. So South Korea is heading toward a multicultural country with only 1% left.
Is that how you view our country, as a big company?
Oh, my bad.
A well-oiled machine.
Yes.
You know, I think that's actually really fascinating that the OECD standard for a more diverse, multicultural country is such a low portion of the population being represented by foreigners, just 5% of the total population.
Right. We're going there.
And South Korea is really close.
Right.
So which citizenships take up the most foreigner population in South Korea?
So by country, the most foreigners came from China, with about 800,000 foreigners living in South Korea, followed by people from Southeast Asian countries such as Vietnam and Thailand.
Okay, so we've dropped the big word of the day, right? Korean dream, but we're not exactly sure what exactly the reasons are for the Korean dream. What are they striving for? Is it similar to the American dream we just described?
Right, it seems similar. It was found that the majority of foreigners visiting and staying in Korea are for the purpose of employment and study. So it's pretty much similar to American dream.
Okay.
In particular, foreign workers accounted for about 9% of the total. About 170,000 foreigners came to Korea for study or vocational training. When sorted by type of visa issued to the foreigners, the number of foreigners who visited Korea for the purpose of non-professional employment was the most at above 223,000, except for about 485,000 overseas Koreans who came back to their home country simply to return to South Korea. The majority of foreigners for non-professional employment purposes are foreign workers working in domestic small and medium-sized enterprises and factories. Foreign workers who want to engage in simple labor-oriented industries are working with non-professional employment E9 visas in South Korea. So this visa allows them to stay for a maximum of 3 years. And if they are re-employed on the condition that they continue to work, they can stay for another 1 year and 10 months.
And apparently the numbers of those workers are growing and expected to grow even more.
Right. So the number of foreign workers has continued to increase this year. It was confirmed that the number increased by 1.3% compared to 226,000 in May last year.
I guess that's driven by demand and more people required in the labor forces there.
Right.
You mentioned people are coming to Korea to study as well, pursue higher education. What's the demographic for that? After the population of coming to South Korea to work, many foreigners came to Korea to learn something. Okay, so the second most popular
right.
reason.
There were about 121,000 international students and 55,000 general trainees. This seems to be the result of South Korean universities actively attracting foreign students in recent years. Universities have been promoting the globalization of their campuses as their slogan, expanding and receiving a lot of admissions and transfers for international students. And this is because the proportion of the globalization index has increased in various comprehensive evaluation indices conducted in Korea for universities across the country.
And not to be just kind of a Debbie Downer, but if you think about it, with a declining birth rate and less kids in general, universities are also businesses and they have to have an angle there. Attracting foreign students would be mutually beneficial, wouldn't it? Especially if they desire to live the Korean dream.
Right.
But there's a reason why the demand for, I guess, seeking education in Korea is high. Pop culture.
Of course. Analysts say the Korean pop culture, K-pop, has been in the spotlight on the world stage, and the Korean wave has been blowing, and the number of foreigners who want to learn about Korea has increased.
Okay.
Right. So besides international students, there were about 1,700 technical trainees and 2,000 professors writing or researching their thesis at universities.
On Korean pop culture? Right. Just kidding.
No, on everything.
On everything. But what may get your attention is pop culture after all. With the growing number of foreigners in South Korea, how are, of course, the locals, Koreans, reacting to this increasing diversity? I think it's human nature to be afraid of something you don't understand.
Right.
Fear of change is, I think, instinctive.
Right. I think it's what everybody naturally feels when a change starts to come at you, right?
Could it be a threat?
Right.
What does this mean for our day-to-day routines?
Right.
It's because it's uncharted territories. Naturally, there might be some pushback.
Right. Although the Korean people welcome foreign workers who come in to fill the shortage of jobs, it has been found that they have a negative or reserved position on granting nationality those migrants, refugees, and illegal immigrants living in South Korea.
Okay.
In addition, although they thought that migrants act as an opportunity factor in our society, there were many opinions that granting rights to migrants and controlling borders should be stricter.
I think that ought to be, absorbed separately too, right? Refugees, migrants, illegal immigrants.
Right.
Those are three very separate topics, but the maybe not understanding what to expect comes into question. So people are saying that there should be fewer foreigners in the nation. Is that right?
Right. So according to the results of a mobile survey of 2,207 adult men and women between September and October last year, 38% of people answered that the number of migrants coming to live in Korea should be reduced from now. And 36% said it should be at the current level. And 26% said it should increase. So it's a little bit similar, but then the majority was the people answering that the number should go down.
Okay. However, are people willing to accept foreigners as one of South Korea's social members? I think that's an important part. It's not just about letting them migrate and obtain useful visas and citizenship. It's about, can they I don't know, interconnect with the local culture, and will the system allow that to happen?
Yeah, so on the other hand, different from the previous answer saying that the foreigners living in South Korea should decrease, the opinion that immigrants should be accepted as members of our society was on average 3.65 points on a 5-point scale, which is a little bit high.
Okay.
Higher in favor with more than 66% giving positive answers than negative, which remained below 18%.
Okay, so to be fair, once they're in the country, helping them maybe acclimate to social culture seems important, at least according to surveys.
Yeah, so even the view of pedigrees was more opposed to the view that even if migrants acquire nationality, it's difficult to become a true Korean, with 38% agreeing and more than 42% disagreeing with the sentence.
What does it mean to be a true Korean? I don't think I feel true Korean.
Why?
Because I feel like a hybrid. That's the thing I'm pushing. I mean, I don't necessarily identify as a Korean American either. I'm somewhere in between, and I'm going to invite our writer, Junie, and we're on the same boat.
Right.
And the thing is, I guess depending on who you ask and how you phrase that question, that could be an entirely divisive conversation. True Korean.
True Korean meaning, I think what people are saying is like, can you eat kimchi? Like, do you get angry do you get anxious whenever there's a game between Japan and South Korea?
Stereotypes,
Stereotypes,
okay.
right? Yeah.
All right. So that's fair. So we're trying to better understand how people in the public feels about this integration of foreigners in a Korean society.
Right.
Is there more to that survey?
Yeah. So on the other hand, more people agreed than disagreed with the opinion that immigrants should be accepted as the center of population extinction risk. In other words, there is no great reluctance to accept migrants as members of Korean society, but there are many negative opinions about accepting migrants from a functional point of view to solve the population problem, which I thought was right on point when describing the nature of South Koreans as we are the people of Cheong, which is translated as full of affection and warm-hearted people. We are willing to accept them as members of Korean society, but tend to get offended when they start to think that foreigners are taking their jobs.
I think that's universal.
Right.
We're just taught better that it's racist to frame a particular group of people as a threat. However, if you fear that an incoming set of migrant workers could potentially take your job, that could be a natural inclination. Then which factors are considered important for a foreigner to become accepted as a society's member?
So respondents believe that migrants can achieve successful social integration when they contribute to the welfare system, have language communication skills, practical skills, and a sense of belonging in our society. However, participation in Korean society through nationality acquisition, social activities, and political participation were not considered essential. In detail, speaking Korean, having a sufficient level of education to find a job in Korea, and contributing to the welfare system by paying taxes and social insurance premiums in Korea were 94.6% respectively, taking the highest percentage of the answers. On the other hand, the percentage of participating in Korean elections, acquiring Korean nationality, and participating in meetings or organizations in South Korea were relatively low.
Because baby steps.
Right.
I think first it's the language and then the social structure, and then it's about moving decision makers. So I can see why that's not on top of the priority.
Right.
But eventually that would naturally come up, don't you think, with a growing population to be represented in higher points of offices.
Exactly.
But speaking Korean is apparently important enough.
Of course, because
day-to-day survival.
Right, day-to-day survival. Like if there's a foreigner living in South Korea and you try to talk to them in Korean and the person does not speak you back in Korean, it's a little bit discouraging to accept them as, oh, you are a true Korean, right?
Why do I have a feeling this is just the beginning of a series of conversations to happen?
Right, exactly.
Moving towards a more diverse country, I think it's so complicated. It is about social acceptance after all, so it is important to gauge how the public feels, even if you and I may not necessarily agree sometimes. I think it is important to take into account how do the people feel.
Of course.
Because it's not just about saying, yes, you're in. They have to acclimate in the society and become a member, an active one of society.
Yeah, I mean, everybody needs to feel comfortable, right? Welcoming them or being accepted to the society.
See, it's a mutual relationship. Baby steps, everyone. Thank you so much, Diane, for an insightful conversation.
I'll see you tomorrow.
I'll see you Are you cold?
A little bit. A lot, actually.
It's actually really cold in the studio. See you tomorrow, Diane.
See you.
We have...